As you guys were defining groups, what you didn't have fully maybe was the exemplars for governmental units. What's really interesting is government lobbies government, right? That seems kind of crazy. That local, state kind of associations lobby the federal government for policy and economic kind of concessions. When you think about our tax structure, though, it makes sense. Because where does all the money get funneled to? Where does it go from and where does it go to?
Goes from the people in the states to the national.
It gets funneled out, right. It goes, you pay your local and state taxes and in turn those taxes in federal taxes. But all the money kind of goes in the direction of kind of towards the federal government. And then it comes back with strings. So no wonder you've got groups like the National Governors Association, that's what you might not have had, or the National Conference of Mayors, or the League of Cities. They're trying to lobby. And again, current events often help me because I indicated there's Governors Association meeting in Washington, D.C. right now. I talked about Charlie Baker yesterday, but I assumed you know who he was. He's our new what? He's our new governor. What party is he from? Okay. I want to spin this camera around to my AP and just watch you guys all kind of be deer in the headlights. He's a Republican, right? In Democratic Massachusetts. And again, it's that interesting example of how we like to, what kind of vote is it when you split ticket vote? How we like to split ticket vote. And we might want a local representative who's bringing the benefits, but we might want a more fiscally conservative individual at the helm. Interesting kind of phenomenon here in Massachusetts. At any rate, he's one of the governors that's there in Washington, D.C., and what did I indicate he might be asking for? He might be trying to get some time with Obama to ask for disaster relief, because we got 6 feet of snow out there. That's got all kinds of expensive snow removal, all kinds of damages to the roads, all kinds of workplace lost kind of time and therefore lost productivity. So there's a nice exemplar for you guys to think about.
Would Obama maybe not give it to him just because he's a Republican?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'm more wondering if he would give him time. Here's a rather parochial issue, but the question is, can we spin a snowstorm as a national disaster? You certainly could in the wake of Hurricane Andrew or Katrina. You've got all kinds of vivid things to show that people are suffering from. If it is perceived as a national disaster where people are really suffering, then party becomes probably a non-factor. Because you saw it in New Jersey, in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. I love that we're naming them all now. And you had a Republican governor in Chris Christie, really forge a good working relationship with Obama. Chris Christie praised Obama for how quickly the aid came. And it was a boost for both in some ways. It showed them as moderates, and we love moderates. So, no, I don't think he'd be partisan in that case. The question is, in all the issues coming to me, is this one of the more important ones that I'll give time and attention to? At any rate, there's a bit of an aside. Now, what I gave you guys is, and I don't want you to feel like you have to dig too deeply into it because there's a pretty involved assignment sheet, but I'm going to show you more by way of exemplars what you're going to do. What I want you to look at mostly is that front page. That is a question from the 2004 AP test, and what it's looking at is exactly what we'll look at in the notes here in a second. What we look at next is the tactics that interest groups use, and we analyze why certain interest groups would use those tactics, and we analyze not only the why question with regards to who is the interest group and what are their strengths, but what would be the effectiveness of this strategy. So it's kind of a threefold question. When you look at it, part one is asking you to simply describe a lobbying an interest group tactic. So you have to kind of define it and illustrate it with exemplars. And then what you want to do is you want to kind of talk about why a group would use this. And what you're looking for is, certain interest groups have certain strengths that lend itself to certain tactics, and then also relative to those strengths, it makes those tactics more or less effective. So we're looking at both finding a match, they use the tactic A because it's a match, B because it's effective. So you got to I got to define, I got to illustrate, I got to identify where an interest group would match this kind of strategy and what ultimately would make it effective. And once I've done it in the generic, you see you have to do it with a specific interest group. And so you can imagine if we never covered anything, and all of a sudden you're staring down the barrel of those 4 interest groups. So I don't know I know that they'll typically give you choice, but I don't necessarily know beyond there are some major interest groups that you ought to be familiar with, which interest groups they're going to ask you about, right? It's a bit of a crapshoot. So we need to get kind of as educated about as many of the big kind of heavy-hitting interest groups as possible so that you guys can navigate any question regardless of what group they throw at you. So for that reason, when we go into project phase, I'm going to put you guys into groups of 2, and you're essentially going to handle this question relative to not just these, well, actually because I've got a smaller group, we're going to add like a couple of additional interest groups, but not many beyond, I've got 10 of you, so there's going to be 5 interest groups we present on. So I'll give you this list plus some other ones that we'll pick and choose. And we'll present on at least 5, but hopefully through lecture and the presentation you'll know as many as possible. Okay? So with that question in mind, kind of listen to the presentation in terms of how it goes. One of the main obvious strategies that interest groups use is lobbying. If you look at the question, the first thing you're going to have to do is define what lobbying is. And what it is using essentially direct contact. And there's different forms of direct contact. But direct contact and other forms of contact as part of an organized effort to influence a policymaker, to influence legislation. The term, you hear the word lobby in it, right? And a lobby is a place that you go to do what? If you're hanging out in a hotel lobby or whatever, what do you do there? Yeah, in part, you're kind of hanging out, right? Normally you hang out in the lobby as you wait, right? You're kind of socializing because you got free time, you got downtime. So lobbies are places they wait. What I want you to picture lobbyists as is kind of the world's first stalkers, where they would kind of wait where congressmen and lawmakers would be behind potted plants, and then they'd spring out on them and say, hey, I want to talk to you about X, Y, or Z. So, they waited in the lobbies of the congressmen's offices. They waited in the lobbies of, oftentimes these congressmen, had maybe multiple homes, but maybe they were staying in a hotel. You can go back to the days where they weren't maybe maintaining 2 residences, and they traveled to Washington, D.C. to make kind of law, and they stayed in a hotel. And these stalkers hid behind kind of, plants in the hotel lobbies, and that's where they got the name. Now, as creepy as that sounds, it's the most common form of a strategy for interest groups. About 72% of the Washington-based groups use this strategy. And we'll talk about why in a little bit. But having defined it, I now want to kind of illustrate it. And again, I mentioned that it's ways in which you have direct contact, but there's more than just the one-on-one talking. It can be the one-on-one talking. It might be that I make an appointment with a senator or congressman or someone within the executive branch, within the agencies or departments, and we sit down and we exchange kind of ideas on an upcoming piece of legislation. It might be as formal as that. Why does the member kind of give me the time? Well, the thing you got to remember is interest groups get demonized. They're special interest groups. They're there for their own narrow, selfish interests. And in a nation where we're all about the pluralist theory, we don't like that. We don't like, one side kind of monopolizing things. It sounds like one side is getting unfair treatment. Well, the thing you got to remember about interest groups is they offer valuable expertise. Don't forget that. If you are drafting a bill on pharmaceutical reform, I told you the FDA takes forever to kind of get drugs approved and medical devices approved. And I want to think about speeding up the process. I sure as heck want the AMA at that table. I sure as heck want Johnson & Johnson at that table. Who's the AMA? We looked at the American Medical Association. Why do I want them there? Do they have a vested interest? Yeah. Do they have kind of selfish interests? Sure. But do they have expertise? Yes. Remember the Hamilton quote, and I'm gonna butcher it. He basically said, truth and self-interest aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, right? It may be that my bias and truth line up in this case. And ideally, the member is sitting down with enough other people from the other side of the issue that they get a balanced perspective. But I want the experts there at the table. Why else do they get at the table? Well, they might be there because of their status. We'll talk about it as a reform issue, but there is this revolving door that if you were, charting a career path, one of the smartest things you can do is become a political insider and then trade it to an industry for big bucks. Because you know the ins and outs of Washington, D.C., and you can help them navigate what they want with regards to their issue. And they pay you quite a bit. If I was to kind of navigate a nice career for you guys, if anybody has aspirations to be a political science major and doesn't want to just be a teacher, what I would say is pair it with some sort of content expertise. Major in biomedicine, because that's, health and longevity are going to be the big kind of industries and issues for a long time. But pair it with a political science major and go work for the industry, lobbying on behalf of that issue that you have hopefully a real emotional attachment to. And so you've married, I've got content expertise and I feel like I'm doing good because I'm trying to push for good things and I'm making money. Man, that'd be a nice kind of lifestyle. It's going to take you a while. You have to photocopy things for a while first and run and get coffee. But eventually you might get that brass ring. At any rate, if you're someone prominent, you might get access. Sometimes they open the door to you because it's the AARP, and they've come in numbers, and they've got walkers, and they're shaking them at you, and you better listen to them because if they have numbers, they have votes, and if they have votes, they can drum you out of office, and I'm going to let them in. Sometimes there is a moral imperative. That may be why I open the door. An issue that if I seem callous towards or I don't want to listen to someone, it might be an environmental issue. As morbid as this sounds, let's say there was a school shooting, and they happen more often than I care to think about. Would you turn away, Mothers Against Destructive Decisions, MAD? Would you turn away, an advocacy group that's looking to reduce handgun violence? Could you do that in the wake of sometimes, again, there's a moral imperative. You better open the door to these people because the issue begs it, right? So all of these are reasons why you get in the door, and all of these represent kind of forms of direct contact. Some of it is informal, though. Again, we pictured when we pictured Congress in session is everybody down on the floor during floor action. A lot of this just takes place like during dinners, junkets. That's a term for Hawaii's looking to do some economic development. Let me invite a bunch of senators and congressmen to come down to Hawaii to consider a spending bill that allows some development to happen in Hawaii. Who wouldn't like that, right? It's a fact-finding mission in Hawaii. How many of you want to go on a fact-finding mission to Hawaii, right? The Dakotas, they never get anybody to go on a junket. So they do kind of all these informal ways to have contact. And sometimes that's more effective, over dinner, at a seminar or event, right? Another formal way of having direct contact instead of just one-on-one is one with a bunch of people. Industry insiders, lobbyists will often be asked to testify in front of a hearing. Because of their expertise, they might, while they're on the Hill, actually bring some legislation. Again, remember, the members are overwhelmed with the thousands of bills that they have to consider within a legislative year. With all of the strains of running for re-election and raising funds and serving both within their district but within Washington, D.C. So if a member from, hey, there's a pharmaceutical bill or we need reform in terms of making medicine more affordable to people, and Johnson & Johnson just happens to have a draft of the legislation. Geez, you saved me some time and you've got expertise. They'll draft legislation. As well as, again, going to those executive agencies. Don't think it all happens within the legislative branch. The groups that implement the laws are constantly revising their rules and regulations, and they'll come with new ideas for rules and regulations. To give you some terminology, when the person, like I said, is knocking on the door because of status and they're lobbying, we have a different kind of term for it. In a moment, we'll talk about grassroots lobbying. Grassroots lobbying is where the masses kind of collectively coordinate in a non-hierarchical way, because all grass is equal. There's no, more important. It's not like a tree where there's a trunk, right? And branches. It's all grass. So it's people kind of acting collectively in a non-hierarchical way to influence policy. That's called grassroots. When the people that are lobbying are the really influential ones, it's called grass top lobbying. They love terms. They think they're funny too. The political scientists chuckle at that one. Why don't you guys chuckle? How about AstroTurf lobbying? That's when you don't necessarily directly lobby to a congressman. You try to go over the heads of the congressman by going to the media. So there's an artificiality to it, hence it's like our turf field out there, right? AstroTurf lobbying. What's another way I might get access and try to lobby you? Well, I might not lobby you with information. I might lobby you with money. Monetary contributions is something we'll look at a little more specifically. And what we try to do with monetary contributions is, one, ensure elections, and in turn, hopefully you get access. The big question is, does it not only get you access, does it get you a quid pro quo? I gave you money, now vote the way I wanted you to. And we'll look at that a little bit later when we look at reform. And remember that that money is regulated through PACs. You have to kind of a officially registered entity within your lobbying group that we can track the money in. But there's avenues through issue ads and through soft money that I can kind of spend a little more liberally. What's another way of lobbying? Well, you could lobby in the sense of, I'm not going to directly try to influence a member. I might try to lobby government to get a particular person appointed, maybe in the regulatory agencies where I see that their rulings will be favorable to us. The list goes on, and I'm going to draw your attention to a chart. I'll hand it out in a second, but it's in your book, and it gives you kind of a laundry list of lobbying tactics. Now, and again, here I remind you that it's not just within Congress, it's within the executive level. On some level, you can kind of try to lobby. You can't necessarily lobby the courts, but there are, again, Department of Justice and other agencies that have a judicial kind of function that you might be able to lobby. And we certainly lobby on the state level as well. Why do you select lobbying? Why would you, do this kind of, form of, formal direct contact as a way to kind of influence policy? Well, if your issue lends itself. Certain issues are content related. Like I said, I was talking about the medical industry, and let's look at universal health care. Man, that's a complex issue. I need expertise to understand that. Therefore, the need for expertise is a reason why people would lobby on that issue. The population passing the law is receptive to it. They're desperate for expertise, and I have that expertise. So that's a good kind of pairing. Similarly, it might just be that my membership is made up of experts or industry insiders. So there's this kind of, when you're looking at why choose this strategy, first thing you want to look at is, what's the issue? The second thing you want to look at is, what is the membership of this group? If it's the AMA, it's going to lend itself to lobbying. If it's Trial Lawyers Association, it's going to lend itself to lobbying, because you've got kind of insiders, you've got heavy hitters in there, right? Sometimes it's just because it's the most viable option, because the other ones aren't working. That's maybe a trap door way of approaching it. Sometimes we lobby simply because we got a lot of money to throw around, and money equals influence. So you might look at your group and say, is this a wealthy group? Is this one with a lot of financial clout? And I'll show you how to get to the finances of those groups through that website, Open Secrets, in a little bit. All right? So, if I have strong kind of membership and issue expertise and financial strength, it might be the most effective manner, because with all of those strengths, I can get to those 535 members of Congress. And that might be the most direct way to influence policy, because who makes policy? These guys, right? So it's a kind of the most direct kind of avenue. I'm going to skip the Globe article for right now, one, because the link is kind of dead. So here we kind of talk about it's the most direct route to a receptive group, right? Now, in that essay question, you then had to look at other strategies. And as I said, one other strategy is this grassroots strategy. Again, you use grass as the analogy, where you think of it as a kind of a non-hierarchical, organic movement. It happens naturally. There's not someone kind of running the show. What you see with grassroots strategies is a number of ways they make you into lobbyists. So when I look at the strategies, what the strategies have in common is they all are different ways to empower individuals to put pressure on elected representatives, okay? And I don't know why I just had this brainstorm. Half the time I try to run the links by standing up and standing in front of it. I'm going to run it from the side. And what I want you guys to see, we're going to do this kind of fast, is in part what you're going to do in the project. You're going to go into your interest group's website and look at all the ways in which you're going to be able to define who your interest group is, and you're going to begin to understand what strategies they use and why, and you're going to see all the ways they have outreach. All right. So when I talk about, I'm going to kind of drive this way. When I talk about grassroots strategies, one of the ways that they reach out to you and are effective is by kind of cutting out the middleman, cutting out media and finding ways to get you information about their issue directly. And a lot of times they're using social media for that. So what's interesting is here's the NRA's webpage. And they have like a live TV channel here that will begin to kind of broadcast content in what they think are important issues. So you might be at home watching the NRA channel, right? Or, whoops, my mouse is all screwed up and it double clicks and then things shut down and then I get upset because it takes too long for things to open. But here is the Anti-Defamation League and they have a YouTube channel. And again, it's a way of like, here's after the shootings in Paris, we've got the French Prime Minister speaking on issues of kind of, tolerance and the rise of violence. So I can put content right in your hands and I get you informed and then I'm going to point you like a missile at Congress. And I think I just closed down this one. This one was really cool. This is Amnesty International. And what they do is, A, they have a Facebook page of their own. But B, you could have essentially, I'm not entirely sure how it works, but essentially if you were to do this trial by timeline, what Amnesty International does is show you what would happen if you had your Facebook page and lived in a different country. So it shows you like what every post might have resulted in if you lived elsewhere. Whether it was a picture or a comment or a place that you went to. I thought that was kind of cool. So those are all examples of how they kind of, again, will try to directly contact you and give you the information firsthand. And then, like I said, they'll begin to give you ways to take action. So speaking of taking, we're going to still look at ways they get you information. So let me see if I didn't close down all my links. All right, I think this is fun. This is the National Association of Realtors. Maybe I'm not going to get you kind of excited over going to my Facebook page or social media page unless I kind of sweeten the pot. So the National Realtors Association has kind of like a junket. They have a getaway. And they have this big convention and everyone goes and, there's dinners and there's events. And one of the keystone events is a concert. And in this case, it featured Jennifer Hudson. I'm hip. And, there's pictures of realtors rocking out to Jennifer Hudson. And she's singing about, I wish I could sing. Sing about real estate. I like houses. I don't know what she sang about. Maybe she sang about, mortgages. But you go there and it's fun, but they're also giving you information and they're kind of getting you to, get excited about things. Yeah, where'd you go? No, it closed down, so I got to go here. All right, because this one's fun. ARP, who are they? Old people. What is their nickname? Not the Black Panthers. The Gray Panthers. They have a getaway. It takes them a little longer to get there. But man, they're rocking out in Hawaii. Or it's not Hawaii, Miami, excuse me. And they have, a big event where they all go into, Hawaii, Miami, and, there's a schedule and speakers, and they party. And they kind of, get mobilized with regards to their issue, okay? So, the other way that I'm going to have direct contact with you, I've gotten you informed, now I want to point you like a missile. And one of the ways I would do that is to get you to say sign on to petitions. Now, it used to be they came door to door. Anybody ever someone knock on your door one time trying to get you to sign something? Probably an environmental group, or maybe they wanted you to join a church. I mean, for the church, right? There you go. Okay, so church a little different, but here they would have a petition, and you can kind of see a list of these different petitions, and you can open them up, and now you can do it electronically. They don't even have to send anybody to your door. Another way to do it, though, don't close. What action alerts yet? Yeah, all right. So there are action alerts, and you can kind of sign up to be a member of PETA, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and they will send you action alerts, and then in turn direct you to take action to, protect against cruelty against animals. When you look at some of these ways they want you to take action, it is literally electronic correspondence to a member. So you sign up to become kind of a member for these action alerts, and then, yes, everything's working. As you are kind of a member, they'll send you a form letter to go ahead and send. I'm going to send this form letter, and I can personalize it. I can change words. But they give you a form letter. You give an electronic signal. Now, if you were a person that got a form letter, would you pay attention to this at all? But you would. Remember what I said I did as like a lowly intern in, every time someone called or wrote a letter, what did I do? I counted it. Remember? And if we got 5,000 of these electronic, I don't care if it's electronic, if 6,000 people took the time, 100,000 people, took the time to do this, you better do something about this issue. So again, they're going to kind of point you like a guided missile. You can, one fly-ins yet? Yeah, this is awesome. Sometimes they won't let you, you're not just going to correspond. They're going to bring you to Washington, D.C. They're going to have a fly-in. So here's a National Farmers Union fly-in. They're going to bring all kinds of farmers into Washington, D.C. on the same day, and they're going to go knocking on doors, and I'm going to give them little talking points. So I hope they arrive in overalls with a piece of hay in their mouth. They literally had a tractor parade when they did this. They showed up in a group of tractors, and then they went knocking on doors, and for the image, I want them in overalls. And they talked about their issues. The other thing that I can do is send them armed not just with information, but with a knowledge of who they're lobbying. So here's the American Conservative Union. The American Conservative Union. And they look at each of these corresponds to a piece of legislation and tracks how they voted on it and gives you a score. And because this is the Conservative Union, it was fun to pull up the Massachusetts delegate and look at, on a scale of 0 to 100, how they rate. Or similarly, here's another, this is the National Right to Life. So we're looking at anti-abortion and how they rate Massachusetts. It's only been 2 votes thus far, but 0%. So I can get you to directly lobby. The other thing I can do is try to get you to vote. Close down. All right, I got to go outside of it. Don't go anywhere. This is the best moment here. Because I want to show you, don't go anywhere. I'll write passes if I have to. This takes 2 seconds.
sticker to prove it.
I'm going at lunch, I can't wait.
Only 10 my voters for American Idol. And you know what I'm doing at lunch today? Updating my Facebook profile. You guys on Facebook? Didn't think so. Besides, one vote means diddly squat.
Whoa! You can't talk that smack and not get knocked back, Gary! Vote is your voice. That's all kinds of constitutional, baby! You better vote, or it's us who vote! Whoa, sucker!
I'm Terry Tate, and I'll approve this message.
All right, that's a gag, but they do have, all these interest groups have ways of getting out the vote, of getting you to the polls. Terry Tate won't necessarily attack you, office linebacker. All right, so again, what's your extra little homework tonight? You're going to listen to those 4 clips, and you're going to give me one comment for each clip that shows that you listen.
One comment on where? Is it on YouTube? Or where
I'm going to email you the link. I think that's easier.
And then we're gonna.
You'll click the
email-
link, you'll listen to it, and just write on a piece of paper
Oh.
to prove to me that you listened to each. Just a comment, and don't give me 10 comments that are all the same. All right, have a good day.